Spider-Man has got a lot of villains. Some really good, some really bad, and a few that are so good but maybe kind of a little overrated. I'm Adam Andrews, you're watching Top 10 Nerd, and this is the Top 10 Overrated Spider-Man Villains. Coming in at number 10 is Mysterio. I may catch some flack for saying this, but I've never really liked Mysterio. I thought he was really cool as a kid, but that's because I didn't understand that Mysterio's illusions were never really more than visual effects. Mysterio's shtick of using illusions when compared to the rest of Spider-Man's rogues gallery is just simply not that impressive and not that massive of a threat. Even almost every other villain on this list is more intimidating than Mysterio is. It's not surprising his character manages to pass away so much, but it's infuriating that it never matters because it's almost always written off as an illusion just so we can bring the guy back again. The other problem is that after facing the guy a few times, there is no reason Spider-Man should continue to be fooled by Mysterio and his illusions. I'm sorry, he shouldn't. And bouncing off of that, it's important to add that none of these illusions are created by any kind of superpower, which makes some of his illusions make no sense. I will say he did work really well as a member of the Sinister Six, and I think his portrayal in the Spider-Man Far From Home movie was pretty great, but other than that, yeah. Number 9, Rhino. We're going to the hive of scum and villainy known as Reddit here, with one user who spoke on the overratedness of Rhino by saying the villain was not all that deep or complex, but his character concept, design, and powers are so memorable that you just kinda end up liking him anyways. And I mean, yeah, that's really the gist of it. Alexei has kind of always just been the brawn over brains, and even when he has been given growth and even seemed like he might become an anti-hero at one point, it always has been taken away, forgotten, or just led to tragedy for the character anyways. Alexei started as a basic thug with the Russian mafia before having his Rhino armor permanently bonded to his body. Eventually, and over time, he would be able to remove the suit and even have his intelligence increased, both of which led to tragedies that forced him back to his villainy. The Rhino has gotten by on his iconic concept and design, but he either lacks or has refused the real depth of other Spider-Man villains, leaving people to believe Rhino has earned more praise than he deserves as a villain. I just want to see him become an anti-hero. That's all I want, really. Number 8, Chameleon. As the first ever villain to face off against the wall crawler, the Chameleon will always have a special place in the hearts of Spider-Man fans. It doesn't change the fact, as a repeating villain who doesn't really change up his MO, the Chameleon's appearances can get a little stale. According to the people of Reddit, again, Chameleon is the most overrated because the nature of his gimmick makes his stories so repetitive. There are only so many times that a dramatic reveal of Chameleon having impersonated someone can truly have its maximum effect. Eventually, the gimmick gets old, leaving some to see Chameleon as overhyped. His connection to other villains, though, does make him kinda cool, and his way of fighting Peter is more psychological than physical, which is also cool. Even if he was the first, he isn't the villain you hear people talk about all the time. Number 7, Judas Traveller. The Clone Saga was rough. That is something a lot of fans agree on. While I'm still a fan because it gave us both Ben Reilly and Kane Parker, I still admit it was rough, and one reason for that was one of its central players, Dr. Judas Traveller, even though he barely appears in the wiki for the story and has kinda nothing to do with clones. Man McNulty from Fansided describes Judas like this, and I quote, "Imagine if pro wrestler Kevin Nash became Marvel's Sorcerer Supreme, got heavy into the works of Friedrich Nietzsche and Carl Jung, and dressed up as though he lived in 19th century Victorian England. In addition, he's accompanied by a quartet of sycophantic groupies called The Host, and often debates with the Grim Reaper from Ingmar Bergman's The Seventh Seal, dubbed the Squire. Oh, and he's also as omnipotent as Q from Star Trek The Next Generation." I wish I was making all that up, but that's actually what that guy said. So that guy that I just described is for some reason wasting his time on the street level Spider-Man, and there is literally no good reason for it. Former Marvel editor Glenn Greenberg has said that pretty much all they knew about Traveller was he was some super powerful psychiatrist studying the true nature of evil for some incredibly vague reason. They eventually just made him a mutant, but also made it so he actually lied about how powerful he actually was, and they also made him just become another of Norman Osborn's lackeys, which seems like a hell of a waste given the potential they had initially given him with his powers. Number 6, the Jackal. Some people just really overstay their welcome. Some people seem really great at first, but then reveal they seem to kinda just suck. The Jackal is both. The Jackal is more so overrated in a publishing sense, as in relation to how much the villain is featured in stories, but no one is asking for that. When he first came on the scene back in 1965, following the death of Norman Osborn, Miles Warren was coming up as the next real major villain for Spider-Man, a villain with a focus on experimenting with biology and cloning. Unfortunately, as the main initiator in that mess that was the Clone Saga, the Jackal lost a lot of good faith, and no matter how much Marvel tries to slick him with a fresh coat of paint and throw him back into the mix, the damage is done. It's upsetting because the character had so much damn potential, and then when he lost it all, no one seemed to really want to give him a proper chance after that. Number 5. Morlun. When Marvel brought on writer J. Michael Straczynski as the writer of Amazing Spider-Man, I don't think anyone realized that it would lead to some of the most controversial moments in the wall crawler's history. One of these moments was the idea that the radioactive science fiction spider which bit Peter Parker was apparently now the emissary of a mystical spider god, making Spider-Man no longer simply a sci-fi created hero, but also a supernatural one. This meant he needed supernatural enemies too. Enter Morlun and the Inheritors. Essentially, Morlun is a vampire, but instead of feasting on blood, Morlun and his family feed off energy from animal god avatars called totems, and spider totems, like Spider-Man in particular, are their favorite. Feasting to extend their already long lives is pretty much all the motivation they really get. People seem to think that Morlun is a pretty unstoppable heavy hitter, despite the fact that he has been defeated and lost his life on multiple occasions. That was all before his family were introduced in the awesome 2014 Spider-Verse event, but this also explained the reason Morlun kept seemingly coming back to life, and it's all because he and his fellow inheritors cloned themselves, which is totally valid for a comic book, but I still think it's kind of a little bit lazy. Just a little. While Spider-Verse was very cool, I think Morlun and his fam are just a little bit more hyped up than they really deserve. Number 4. Green Goblin. I know this one's gonna pee off a lot of you people. As the number 1 villain of Spider-Man, outside of arguably Doctor Octopus of course, the Green Goblin is bound to be just a tad bit overhyped. But looking into the character a bit more reveals that, holy heck, he totally is overhyped. Norman Osborn's main thing is just trying to ruin Spider-Man's life for interfering in his corporate tomfoolery. It's just one middle-aged, shady but successful businessman's pure hatred of a poor, superpowered teenager. Now, it's fair to say that Norman has been a villain to everyone during Dark Reign, but as in most cases, a lot of the time, Norman is orchestrating events from behind the scenes, sort of. The problem is, Norman has been shoehorned into way too many Spider-Man events that he really had no business being involved in the first place. I'm looking at you, Clone Saga, and it's all because he was the first villain to learn Spider-Man's secret identity and then end the life of his first GF, Gwen Stacy. He has dealt some serious emotional blows to Spider-Man, that is a statement and it is true. But still, the Green Goblin's actual abilities are nothing crazy, the execution of his plans aren't flawless, and Marvel hasn't really done anything super interesting with his character in a long time. And even when they do something, like with the altruistic turn to the Golden Goblin, we all secretly know that the character will return back to his same boring villainous self at some point. Number 3. Cadaverous. While a good share of villains on this list are actually some noteworthy scallywags who have done enough to at least earn their place, Cadaverous is one of Spider-Man's villains that was literally hyped up and did kind of absolutely nothing with it. Well, not entirely. Ivan Renz was an employee of Stark Industries alongside his mentor and Peter Parker's parents. They developed the Key, tech that could potentially bring people back to life. But the experiments failed, sending his mentor to the afterlife. Tony Stark dismantled the unit. Ivan eventually became the supervillain known as Cadaverous, only ever appearing in the J.J. and Henry Abrams written Bloodline Spider-Man storyline from 2019. Mary Jane Watson loses her life to Cadaverous on the 5th page of the first issue after Spider-Man is swarmed and beaten pretty badly by him and his minions. Then Spider-Man just completely quits. 12 years later, the story has a one-armed version of Peter Parker who is now the honestly pretty bad single father of Ben Parker, Peter and Mary Jane's son. After Cadaverous returns out of hiding and kidnaps Peter to use his blood for his evil plans, it's up to the new Spider-Man, Ben Parker, with the help of his friend Faye Ido, and old Tony Stark and Riri Williams to fight Cadaverous and his minions, which includes a cyber zombified team of Avengers. But this is all we ever see of Cadaverous, and we never have seen him since. The man beats Spider-Man and we only ever get a 5-issue story about him. I don't know. I'm just saying. Number 2, Carnage. Carnage has rightfully amassed a huge fan base. He's headlined several comic book miniseries and played a part in some bigger villains events. He even had his own ongoing monthly, but I still think Carnage is also one of Spider-Man's slightly overrated villains. The only reason he exists at all was so Marvel could capitalize off of Venom's popularity during the late 1980s and early 1990s. As a more extreme, red version of Venom, Carnage basically filled in as Marvel went and turned Venom into an anti-hero. After Marvel decided that symbiotes could suddenly asexually reproduce, Carnage was born from Venom, bonding itself to Eddie Brock's cellmate, Cletus Cassidy, who was essentially the Joker, and that's not just me speculating. Eric Larson, the co-creator of Carnage, admitted he just directly copied the Joker and just changed his skin and hair color to create Cassidy. So my point here is that while Carnage is definitely scary, and he has been really cool in his latest stories, he is one part of a ripoff of Batman's best villain, and another part an extreme copy of a much better Spider-Man villain with a fresh coat of paint. I still recommend Absolute Carnage though, I'm just saying. I still recommend it. And finally, in at number 1, Facade. There are a lot of villains who kept their identity secret, with the whole fun of the character being the act of trying to solve the mystery and then being shocked or surprised when it was finally revealed. That last part is kind of an important part of the whole payoff of a mystery, even if it's ultimately kind of a letdown. So needless to say, when a character like Facade, that stands for Full Acclamation Combat and Defense Exploskeleton, shows up hiding his identity, and who to this day has never had his identity revealed, people just stop caring. The billion-dollar Facade suit was created by a pharmaceutical company, which raises a ton of questions on its own, but its inventor was sent to the afterlife by whoever it was that stole the suit. Photographer Lance Bannon did actually get a picture of who stole the suit, but what do you know, in true mystery fashion, the room was too dark to see the face of the criminal. But even then, Facade took Bannon's life just in case. J. Jonah Jameson, Arthur Bryce, and another photographer, Cole Cooper, are all possible suspects, but we will never know because when the suit got destroyed by Spider-Man, the criminal inside the suit still managed to escape without being seen. And then, Marvel had the audacity to have the character willing to divulge his identity to Spider-Man, and Spider-Man decides that he's got more important things to do, and he leaves. What was the point? What was it? I got really emotional. And there you have it. Thank you guys so much for watching on Top 10 Nerd. I'm Adam, and I'll catch you all on the flippy flop. Peace out, nerds. Twip, twip.